Time for a change of pace. This one's 100% gameplay. I'm so glad that this generation of consoles can be considered retro now. When I was a kid, it was new, but now, it's not. I am probably all the way biased with this game because even playing as an adult, I could feel the dopamine coursing through my body as I went, Gah! Gah! It was made by Midway, and no wonder I can't remember the last time they made a game. They liquidated in 2010. These guys made Mortal Kombat.
Fatality.
Hydro Thunder! That's what he sounded like.
Hydro Thunder!
Journey. But not this Journey. This Journey. I didn't believe this was real at first, but apparently it's a game where you play as Journey. This Journey. And you fight aliens. This is the part where you play as the drummer. This is real. They also made Cyberball 2072. Plagiarism. Long story short, though, they were one of the premier game companies making the sort of games you associate with the 80s and 90s arcade era. Interestingly, and recalling why I loved NHL Hit so much, I had forgotten that it all began back in the year 2000. Long before the like button, which you should delicately destroy so more people see this video, with a game called
NFL Blitz 2000!
As far as I know, when this game came out, there wasn't really another sports game like it. My child brain nearly exploded when I discovered you could do things like ignite your team on fire and tackle people after the plays had ended. See, today's games have toxic players simply because they're bad people. By contrast, NFL Blitz built toxic behavior straight into the game.
You're pathetic!
I remember playing with a friend that only played dumb, realistic football games that I hated. Looking at you, John. So when I tackled his receiver well before the ball had gotten to him, this is illegal in football if any of you don't know, and then yelled, "Boom, bitch!" He never came back to my house. The game also had hundreds of cheats that you could implement while the game loaded on this little slot machine looking thing, but if you never bothered to memorize any of those like me, you just mashed buttons like... And then you ended up with giant heads, tiny bodies, and infinite turbo. Which incidentally is a category on Pornhub. But that's not what we're here for. We're talking about new game, new generation. Look at the graphics! See, hockey is what I played growing up. I wasn't a top athlete or anything, but I knew how to roller skate. And when I found out my favorite arcade-driven sports series was coming out with an NHL entry, I went out and made new friends just so I could go Gah! And ruin the relationship. This game is definitely one of the reasons I struggle to stay engaged playing games online, because I like learning all the fixed parameters of how a game works and then completely dominating it. You can see this exact quality in the titles I love today. This game's exactly the same way, and if anyone ever beats me at it, I'll bury them in the woods somewhere just to stay on top. NHL Hits is different from other hockey games and hockey in general in that you only play with 4 players on the rink instead of 6. The rink is smaller than official size, and there's no penalty for knocking the shit out of your opponents. It has all the official teams and players from the era it came out. Hello, Mr. Madano. And not only can you build your own team in addition to the league, you can take them through their own goal-oriented campaign followed by an entire Stanley Cup season if you're addicted enough. But it's not really worth it. When you win the Stanley Cup, your team just sort of skates around and you realize the accomplishment hasn't actually added anything to your life. Kind of like real sports! And now we're right back to a game that just feels good to play. Defensive offense, offensive defense, boosting, fire lightning, fights. Everything this game offers pumps dopamine into your head brain. At some point I realized I'd fallen into the habit of watching my own replays because I just love seeing how the computer fails to stop my onslaught. And this is another way I damage friendships, because I'd forget I was playing with a real human and be like, "Nya, wah, 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 wah." Bro, you're being so fucking annoying right now. Yeah. There are 2 main mechanics to protect the puck when you have it, and 2 ways to get the puck when you don't. When you have the puck, you can either deke or puck guard. When you don't have it, you can either check or poke check. This allows things to play out sort of like a game of rock, paper, scissors, but with movement and coordination mixed in. It's incredibly satisfying when your opponent comes up to try and knock you on your ass, but instead you're like, bloop, bloop, bloop. But let's say they start catching on, so they're like, I'm gonna poke check. Whoop, whoop. Ha see ya! And if you're like, it's a bit simplistic, isn't it? Well, sort of in concept, I guess, but then you start getting deeper into the various methods and combinations of skill sets. Like how earlier I mentioned NFL Blitz had turbo. Well, NHL Hits has that too, so if you time it just right, you can protect yourself with a deke while skating just out of reach of a poke check, thereby defending yourself from both potential puck loss threats, unless your opponent counters your double defensive offensive tactic by switching to his player at the last moment and waiting for the animation to play out so he can swoop in and wham! See how this can take you down a strategic rabbit hole? Easy to pick up, and honestly easy to get good at. But mastery? That's the real shit. But for real, this game is so easy to pick up and play. I mean, not illegally, using ROMs and an emulator, of course, but by picking up a potentially damaged console that you have to spend time and effort leaving your house to obtain and pay for. Not by downloading it for free for far less time and effort, though no, definitely not that way. And while we're at it, I mean, I'm not going to make a full video on this, but you should also play Red Card 2003. Does anyone know this existed? It's not just hits or blitz pasted onto soccer, although you do get to kick people in the face. Red Card is different because 2003 was peak Matrix popularity and they just added that into the game. Before Keanu Reeves was John Wicking or jumping into video games,
Cyberpunk.
he was doing this. And they just put that into the game. So yeah, just tack that onto your arcade sports adventure.